I still remember the day I sat alone in a tiny room, holding a cold cup of coffee, my head filled with nameless noise. When you have lived long enough with small disappointments, you understand that weariness does not come from one great event, but from 100 times avoiding the question, what is really happening in my life? I once thought I needed advice, that if someone showed me the way, I would follow, but it turned out that was not so. I had plenty of advice from books, from acquaintances, from advertisements on the radio. Yet I did not move, not because I was lazy, but because I could not see myself in any of the paths they outlined. Then, one unremarkable afternoon, I heard someone say, sometimes your whole life changes because of one right question. That was not advice, but a prompt to face myself. So I wrote on a blank sheet of paper a question. Do I really want to live like this for another 5 years? No spotlight, no applause, just me, that paper, and a feeling as if something had just cracked open inside. I did not have an answer right away, but I did not need one, because the important thing is not how quickly you answer, but whether you have the courage to carry that question with you every day. A right question, you see, does not force you to decide. It forces you to look straight. And the more you look straight, the less you can continue living wrongly. You may be seeking a new direction, tired of the cycle of effort, exhaustion, and effort again. You are not lazy. You are just running on a wheel without knowing where you are headed. Do not rush to speed up. Pause. Ask yourself, what am I living for? And is that truly mine? People often think turning points come from events, a shock, a great failure, or action. But often, the real turning point comes quietly, from a question you dare to ask when no one forces you to. And do you know the strange thing? That quietness makes it profound because it does not come from outside, but from within you. From the moment you start asking the right questions, you no longer live merely to react. You live with purpose. You choose your values again. You redefine success. You stop letting others decide who you are. You begin crafting your own answer, slowly but steadily. That is how every transformation begins, not with fanfare, but with an ordinary person at a very ordinary moment, daring to ask themselves something difficult. And from there, everything else starts to shift, not all at once, but little by little. Your life veers in a direction you could not have foreseen. So do not fear questions that make you uneasy. What is there to fear? That you will face the truth? That you will have to change? Believe me, far scarier is living a whole life without ever asking a question that forces you to wake up. Start today, not with a 5-year plan, but with a simple question. Am I living as the truest version of myself? Then listen to the silence that follows. That is where the new story begins. Are you ready? There is a paradox many fail to see. We live for years in a story we did not write ourselves. Each morning, we wake and slip into a role. Sometimes the model employee, sometimes the dutiful parent, sometimes the obedient child. We act according to expectations, speak in patterns, choose as the crowd does. And gradually, one day, we sit down, look at ourselves, and no longer recognize who we are. I went through that phase. I had a stable job, dressed neatly. Friends said I had a future. But deep inside, I knew I was living a life someone else had scripted. Everything I did to look right. I wore a suit not because I liked it, but because they said success looked like that. I talked about money, but did not truly understand value. I set goals not because I believed in them, But because I feared being seen as lazy without them, I was in a play, and the more I acted, the further I drifted from my truth. That was when I began reviewing my life story. I asked, who wrote this script? Who said success must follow this path? Who said I need a degree, a fancy car, a prestigious title to feel complete? Who said this emptiness is normal? The answer was, I did not know, because I had never asked. You see, society has a strange way of molding people. They do not force, they whisper. They do not command, they guide. And if you are not awake enough, you will think the dreams you chase are yours. But in truth, they are the wishes of teachers, parents, media. Invisible whispers repeated until you believe. I must be this way, but you must be nothing. You only need to wake up and look deeply at what you are living. Is this story truly yours? Are these choices made freely? Or are you reacting to fear? Are the goals you write down born of personal belief or just to prove something to others? And if you realize you are living a borrowed life, then congratulations, because from here you can rewrite. Imagine your life as an unwritten book. The early chapters may not be yours. They may be messy, contradictory, full of sorrow, but you are still the author. And from the next page, you can write anything you want. What to write? Write that you will live with honesty, that you will stop making decisions just to escape something, that you will choose the difficult but right path over the easy but lost one, that you will live from within instead of constantly reacting to the outside. I know rewriting your life story is not easy. It requires pausing old habits, admitting you may have lived off course, learning to listen to yourself again. But I tell you, nothing is more worthwhile. Because once you live rightly, you no longer need to pretend. You do not need to try so hard to convince others. You become a clear being, and the world begins to treat you differently. A miracle happens. You start attracting the right opportunities. You meet people who share your values. You enter environments that help you grow. Not because you are lucky, but because you are living at your true frequency. And this is the last thing I want you to remember. You do not need a miracle. You do not need permission. You only need to pause, look straight, and say to yourself, I will rewrite. No need to wait for the new year. No need for a long vacation. No need for a special event. Today, I rewrite. It is that simple. Because if not you, then who? If not today, then when? One thing I see many people fall into, especially in America, the land of abundance, of countless choices, of every kind of self-improvement program, is they think to change their life, they need to add something. Another course, another relationship, another tool, another reason, another motivational seminar. But the paradox is, sometimes the problem is not that you lack enough, but that you have too much, and that excess is clouding you. Have you ever walked into a cluttered room where everything is present but nothing is truly useful? A good book buried under dozens of half-read ones. A cherished photo hidden by meaningless notes. A great idea never executed because every day you pick up a new one. That is the image of a mind when we do not learn to let go. I was once like that. I had drawers full of materials. I took notes everywhere. I signed up for courses, read books, listen to self-improvement broadcasts. I felt I was progressing until I realized I was not applying anything. I was only accumulating, not transforming. I was learning to know, not learning to do, and that excess kept me in the illusion of movement without truly advancing until one day I decided to try something simple. Stop adding. I stopped reading new books for a month, stopped signing up for courses, stopped listening to more advice. Instead, I returned to 5 core ideas I had once read, and I began living them deeply. Do you know what happened? Everything became clearer. I knew what I wanted, not because I had more choices, but because I had shed what was unnecessary. I began choosing fewer tasks, but doing them thoroughly. I began speaking less, but with more weight. I began seeing others with less prejudice and saw their value more clearly. Then I realized what I lacked was not more, but clarity. Clarity about what matters. Clarity about what truly fits. Clarity about the core values I need to hold. And that clarity did not come from accumulating, but from letting go. If you want to change your life, do not ask, what more do I need? Ask, what can I let go of? Let go of others' expectations. Let go of habits done for recognition. Let go of commitments you do not truly believe in. Let go of chasing every trend. When you start living with less, you start seeing clearly. Like a gardener, a beautiful garden does not come from planting more. Sometimes, the most important task is pulling weeds, trimming branches that drain nutrients, leaving space for light to enter. Your inner life is the same. It only grows when there is room to breathe. And here's the question I leave you today. What are you holding on to that should be released? What are you hoarding that is slowing you down? What are you trying to add just to avoid the necessary silence? If you dare to let go, you will find what you needed was already within you. It was just buried under too much noise. And you will see to go further. Sometimes you only need to step lighter. One thing young people often mistake, and older ones sometimes cannot escape, is that to change your life, you need a grand event, a fated meeting, an awakening moment, some miracle like in the movies. But real life is not like films. The truth is, the biggest changes often start in silence, like a farmer driving a hoe into the earth at dawn. When the world is still asleep, no audience, no applause, just a quiet vow to yourself. I will do this every day. That is how I began to change, not because I met a brilliant mentor, but because I started listening to the small promise within me. Back then, I was young, lost, disappointed, buried in debt. I did not know what would save me, but I knew one thing. If I kept living as before, I would have no future. So I began asking, if I cannot control the world, can I start controlling myself? That was when I made my first vow, not on paper, just a silent promise. From today, I will not let a day pass without learning at least one valuable thing. That was all. It sounds simple, but when you keep it for 90 days, then 365 days, it turns you into a different person. No one notices right away, but you start respecting yourself more. You walk differently, speak differently. Your eyes change, not because you are pretending to be wise, but because you are living as someone truly moving forward. Others may laugh when you make a vow to yourself. They will say, no one is checking on you. True, no one checks on you, and that is the test. When no one watches, do you keep your word? When there is no immediate reward, do you continue? When you lose, feel lost or bored, do you do what you said you would? I learned this from my own life. Successful people are not those who know more, But those who keep their word to themselves better, they need no reminders, no deadlines from a boss, no rewards from outside, because they understand each time they keep a small promise, they are laying a brick for self-respect, for personal belief, for silent credibility no money can buy. A once-weak person who keeps their promise to themselves is more formidable than a genius who lives inconsistently, because they act not just from inspiration, but from discipline, not just when happy, but because of principle. And so, day by day, they become a force, a person of weight. Others begin to respect them, not because they stand out, but because they endure, enduring without a stage. I want you to pause for a minute and ask yourself, when was the last time I kept my word to myself? It could be small, waking up on time, not checking the phone before 9, writing for 15 minutes daily, learning 10 new words, not complaining for a day, things no one sees. But you see, and that is what makes you. Vows to others may build relationships, but a vow to yourself, if kept, builds character. And from character, you can build anything, a lasting career, a happy family, a life of spiritual depth. People often ask me, Jim, if you could teach one thing to the young, what would it be? I would teach this: learn to keep your word to yourself, starting small. And one day, you will sit in that old room, look around, and see that those silent promises carried you to where you are. No need to shout it to the world, just whisper to yourself and do it. Repeat, endure. And from a slow person, you become formidable. Not because you changed the world, but because you changed how you show up in it. For a long time, I thought loyalty meant staying with old friends, familiar conversations, lifestyles I knew. Even when I saw they did not make me better, I stayed because I feared being misunderstood, feared being called arrogant or a traitor. I told myself, they have been my friends since childhood. But one day, I woke up and realized I was trading my future to protect a past that no longer fit. We are taught to be kind, loyal, sociable, but one thing few teach: you can care for someone without giving them your time every day. You can be grateful for old memories, yet step out of the loop that keeps you from growing. That is not betrayal. It is maturity. I began observing, and I noticed when I spoke of dreams, some stayed silent, some smiled faintly, some changed the topic, but others, even if they had achieved nothing, their eyes lit up, they listened, they asked, they challenged me, they made me want to act, not just talk. So I began choosing again, choosing who I sat with during lunch breaks, choosing my appointments, choosing what I read, heard, discussed. I discovered a rule I want you to remember forever. You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I am not saying cut ties with the poor, the weak, the negative. I am saying you must actively plant yourself in environments that make you grow. If you are the smartest in the room, you are in the wrong room. If you are the most driven in the group, you need a new group, because you can only soar when surrounded by others spreading their wings. Back then, I traveled further to hear a good speaker. I spent money I did not have on a book. I did not fully understand. I accepted initial loneliness to stand in a new circle where people discussed ideas, not gossip, principles, not just drinking plans. And then something strange happened. I began changing, not because someone forced me, but because I could not help changing. like a seed placed in fertile soil. It cannot help but sprout. I began speaking differently, thinking differently, deciding differently, not because I tried to stand out, but because I could not return to the old me. The ancient said, near ink, you darken, near light, you shine. But I prefer another saying, where there is wind, sails, know to rise. The people around you are the wind. They can lift you or knock you down. They can blow you to shore or out to sea. Your job is not to complain about the wind, but to adjust your sails and sometimes change the boat. You may lose some old friends. You may face months of loneliness, but I promise you, if you choose the right people to walk with, you will go further than you ever thought. And sometimes those old friends will return, not to blame, but to ask, how did you do it? Then you will smile, not with pride, not with bitterness, just knowing it all began with a choice. The choice to stop staying where you were made small. The choice to seek those who make you stand taller. I think deeper, live with higher standards. And if today you feel lost among people who no longer speak your soul's language, do not be sad. It may be the first sign you are growing. Let that loneliness be the space to plant a new seed. Then you will see life always has room for those determined to change their spiritual environment. One paradox I realized after years of living is this: discipline is what brings freedom. Sounds strange, does it not? Because we often think freedom means doing whatever you want, waking whenever, eating whatever, living however, as long as no one interferes. But I lived like that once, and I only felt more bound than ever, bound by bad habits, bound by procrastination, bound by a weary body, a chaotic mind, and a life going nowhere. The day I began practicing discipline, it felt like fighting myself, as if waking early each morning was a battle, as if writing goals was the dullest thing I ever did, as if reading a book felt like torture. But then I realized I did not hate discipline. I was just unused to controlling myself. I had lived too long by emotion, hungry. I ate, tired. I slept, lazy. I stopped. I let moods dictate actions. And that turned me into a boat without a captain. Discipline is doing the right thing even when you lack enthusiasm. It is going to the gym, not because you are bursting with energy, but because you promised yourself. It is writing a page each night, not because you are inspired, but because you know only consistency yields results. It is declining a night out to keep your vow, not because you dislike friends, but because you love yourself enough not to back down. Imagine a great door called freedom. Beyond it lies a garden of ripe fruit, opportunities, joy. But the key to that door is not luck, not talent, but discipline. And you cannot buy it, cannot borrow it. You must forge it daily through small actions, waking on time, eating with care, speaking responsibly, working with a plan, turning off the television to open a book, stepping out when you want to stay in. One thing I learned, discipline is a mental muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it grows. At first, you force yourself, then you start changing. And one day, you cross a line from must do to want to do. Discipline stops being a barrier and becomes wings. It lifts you above fleeting emotions. It keeps you on the path even when the destination is unseen. It makes you reliable in others' eyes and in your own. I was once undisciplined. I know the exhaustion of breaking promises to myself. I know the shame of starting something and quitting halfway. I know the paralysis of watching others advance while standing still, but I also knew, deep within, I deserved a different life. And the only thing between me and that life was not circumstance, but discipline. So I began with one small thing, waking 30 minutes earlier, then writing 3 tasks, then doing the first one at day's start, then rewarding myself with a light meal when done, then exercising, then journaling. Bit by bit, I rebuilt myself. No need to be perfect, just faithful to the simple, repeated daily. People often ask, how do you stay motivated daily? I say, do not wait for motivation. Ave discipline, because motivation rises and falls, but discipline is the road, and the road is always there, rain or shine. If today you feel no change, do not worry. As long as you started something right, keep going, like planting a seed. Today, you see nothing, but beneath the soil, something stirs. Roots die in, earth parts, and one day you will see. Your quiet persistence was the strongest thing you ever did for yourself. Some lessons you never learn from books. You only learn by looking back and hurting. One such lesson came in my first year of business. I thought I was busy, signing up for courses, attending seminars, talking with friends, taking notes, reading, dreaming. But after a year, I looked back and saw I had achieved nothing. Sales did not rise. Relationships did not grow. I was still a poor man, speaking wealthy words. One day, I complained to my first teacher, I do not understand why things are not moving. I worked all year. He looked at me long, then asked, are you working or just filling time? That question hit like a blow to the chest. I froze. Then he gave me a time chart and said, write down hour by hour for the past 7 days what you did. He hesitated, then wrote, and the truth emerged. I spent 2 hours preparing for something I never did. I lost 3 hours in meetings that led nowhere. I let my mind drift to unimportant tasks and called it research. He said, it is not that you lack time, you do not control it. And from that day, I lived differently. I began to see an unmanaged hour can kill a project. An hour misused can make you miss an opportunity. An hour off course, repeated 365 days, will see you enter the new year with the same old dreams. I learned to treat time like an investor treats money. I began asking, is this hour yielding returns? Is it bringing me closer or further from my goal? I distinguished urgent from important. I set limits on conversations. I planned ahead, and above all, I vowed never let time be wasted just because I lacked the discipline to decide. Time is the only asset you cannot buy more of. You can lose money, then earn it back. You can lose friends, then reconnect. But a day lived without purpose, you never reclaim. And the danger is, waste is not loud. It is silent, like water leaking from a bucket, until you look back and see the bucket is dry. Do you know what scares me most in life? Not failure, not rejection, but waking one day, realizing I lived years without advancing a step, just because I did not control something simple, time. Try this exercise. If you want change, write down 3 things you want to achieve this year. Then look at last week. How many hours did you give them? If that number is less than 5% of your time, you are letting your life drift without direction. You do not need to become hyper-organized. Just be honest with time. 1 morning hour for learning, 1 afternoon hour for client calls, one evening hour to note what you did well and what to improve. Not every hour must be perfect, but each must have purpose. I once thought success came from bigger plans. Later, I saw it is not grand plans, but small hours used rightly that make a life different. I was once quick to anger, to sadness, to discouragement. Each time someone declined my offer, I spent a day brooding. Each time sales dipped, I blamed the market. Each time I saw others succeed, I compared and withdrew. But do you know what stopped me? One day, my teacher looked into my eyes and said, "Jim, if you do not learn to master your emotions, you will never master your life." That silenced me long, because I saw I was not rejected by others. I just did not know how to handle disappointment. I was not hurt by the market. I just did not know what to do when things went astray. I was not treated unfairly by life. I was just not mature enough to see things fairly. Mastering emotions does not mean never feeling sad, never angry. No, it means not letting those emotions steer your life. Like a car climbing a hill, you need an engine, but you cannot let it explode. You need heat, but you must have brakes. Emotions are fuel, but wisdom is the wheel. I began learning to observe myself. When angry, I asked, "What is this teaching me?" When disappointed, I asked, "What am I expecting too much?" When envious, I asked, "What am I neglecting in my life?" When afraid, I learned to take one small step instead of stopping entirely. Do you know why many smart people fail? Because they let emotions defeat action. They wait to feel ready. They wait until fear is gone. They let emotions decide their schedule, relationships, even dreams. And so they circle in an emotional zone instead of crossing into action. I have seen people fail, not for lack of skill, but because one morning they woke feeling low, so they delayed a key call. I have seen those who could have been millionaires, but for fear of rejection, they never spoke up. I was once that person, but when I learned emotions are guests and I am the host, I lived differently. I welcomed emotions, then sent them off. I sat with fear, then walked on with it. I spoke to insecurity, then worked as if I were whole. And bit by bit, I reclaimed control of my life. If you are sad, let yourself be sad for 15 minutes, then return to work. If angry, walk for 30 minutes, then resume talking. If afraid, break fear into small actions and do them one by one. You do not need to conquer emotions instantly. Just do not let them freeze you. Life is a long journey. You will pass through countless emotional landscapes. But if you let each wave carry you, you will drift forever. If you learn to swim in any current, then rain or shine, you can move forward. And here, I want to ask you, in the past week, which emotion held you most? Did it take you where you wanted or keep you in place? If you cannot answer yet, write it down. Write to remember, you have the choice to follow emotions or lead them. The beauty is this: life does not demand perfection to begin. It only asks honesty with yourself, that you have delayed long enough, feared long enough, waited long enough, and now it is time to step out and do what is right. Even if just a small step. Looking back on my years, from a salaried man with empty pockets to a teacher before thousands, I see no grand milestones, only countless small choices repeated daily. I chose to wake early when still sleepy. I chose to call despite fearing rejection. I chose to read when no one required it. I chose not to blame, but to redo. And you know, those small choices, repeated long enough, changed my life. If today you feel not good enough, not strong enough, not ready enough, I want you to know I was there too, but the difference was not that I overcame emotions faster than you, but that I did not let myself stay, stopped by an emotion, act first. Emotions follow. Discipline first. Results follow. Responsibility first. Maturity follows. That is the law. No more wishing for luck. No more avoiding. No more saying, I know. If you truly knew, your life would already be different. Start with one small action today. Do not wait 5 more years to revisit this lesson, because then you will wish, if only I started 5 years ago. And I hope you will not let that be your line. Now is the time to close this lesson, but open another book, the book of action. Start simple. Write one thing you will do right after this, and do it. Do not wait for motivation. You are the source of it. Do not wait for reminders. You are awake enough to remind yourself. And do not wait for perfect conditions. You are the one who will make conditions favorable by transforming from within. So, what will you do right now? The journey to change your life does not start on a perfect day, but with someone daring to live differently in the same old circumstances. Today, that someone can be you